Is comic book continuity necessary? Good question. There's a lot that goes on in comics with story. Is it important to keep track of what happens before and also what's happening at the same time? Let's get into the article. Before we get into the article, if you want to support my work, definitely subscribe to the channel. It's a big help to me. Click the bell for notifications. You can also get collegeofthedead.com, my 48-page full-color graphic novel. And you can get to epicmermaids.com. Sign up to find out when The Mermaids is coming out. It's like Game of Thrones with mermaids. Back to the article. Have you heard of the upcoming book, Batman 3 Jokers? It's a continuation from the Justice League story, Darkseid War, from writer Geoff Johns and artist Jason Fabok. And it's being marketed as the ultimate story of the Batman and the Joker. It looks like we're dealing with multiple Jokers again. That was first broached when got hold of the omniscient Mobius Chair and asked, what's the Joker's true name? Looks like we don't have one, but 3 Jokers to contend with. Well, why not 60 Jokers? Why limit it to 3? You know, just continue to stretch the idea that the Joker is, a villain. You know, but he's more than a villain. He's just evil incarnate. I mean, how are you supposed to know what's going on? How are you supposed to follow all of this? Looks like they're making it real difficult. The average person can tell you that Bruce Wayne lost his parents as a child and dedicated himself to fighting crime. I know that much. Like most superheroes, their origin remains true. Doesn't change, right? It's when you start talking about the details of their adventures is when things can get sticky and crazy. It's enough to give anybody a continuity headache. The comic book industry has had a long love-hate relationship with continuity since its inception. It's an industry big on legacy, but it's also hampered by a weird sense of time. Now, that's true. It's true. Because things are obviously not happening in real time as you're publishing individual comics or individual graphic novels. So it's a little bit difficult to keep track of, and every series and then every creative team might do it a different way, you know. It's an industry big on legacy, but it's also hampered by a weird sense of time. While weeks, months, years pass for us, a comic may only progress days, weeks, or months. When you have popular characters who were first introduced back in the 1930s and 40s, it's inevitable that you'll get tripped up on decades worth of storytelling. Well, yeah. I mean, even if you have characters that were introduced, you know, in the 1990s, like how does that take place over 20 or 30 years when they're telling stories? But going back to the 30s and 40s, like, well, there'd be a great time to have somebody take on a new costume and say, well, I'm the new Captain America because, you know, it's been 30 years, 40 years, 80 years, whatever you want to do. The problem is compounded because when you're dealing with a whole comic book universe, everyone's backstory will never match up perfectly. Timelines are always shifting, events are always tweaking, and reboots are always confusing. Reboots have to be confusing. Are reboots necessary? It's another good question. I think reboots are necessary. It depends what you're accomplishing and what you're trying to do. And the problem is, there used to be a trade-off in publishing where we would do projects and we would do things like, okay, look, we want this to all make sense. So even though we won't introduce 5 or 10 more versions of the same thing. Because if we do that, if we have 7, 8 different Spider-Man titles or whatever we're going to do, there's no way that we can make it all make sense together, even in context with what the ongoing series are, much less looking at the back stories and being like, okay, well, let's make the old stuff make sense with the new stuff that's making sense, and then a common passing of time between all the issues. It's not viable. So there's things that you would do and say, look, I don't want to destroy the integrity of the characters. You know, we've got to kind of limit this. So they would limit it, but they haven't been limiting things. They've just been putting out more and more of the same of whatever works and whatever they think is going to work or whatever is working today, and then it becomes saturated. Almost like when movies go through trends where it's like, okay, well, zombie movies are big, so everybody does zombie movies. superhero movies are big, so then now everybody's got to do multiple superhero movies. Obviously it becomes saturated after a while, but in terms of protecting the integrity of the concepts, you're supposed to limit these things a little bit. Back to the article. Comics' intricate continuities were a point of pride for a while. Yeah. Then slowly little questions started popping up about which stories actually happened and how to explain mixing old characters with new ones. Was this character around during World War II? It's confusing. It is confusing to fit continuity together and try to make it all make sense. However, it's more confusing to completely disregard continuity, because then how do you have meaning in a story? How does a story resonate? Tell me in the comments below. How does a story resonate if none of it really happened? If it wasn't a real thing, what does it become? A dream? What's the significance? Things happen in our lives that we remember and we look back at. And maybe we remember differently because of different situations. We become different people as time goes on. But if you look back and it's like, well, that never really happened. I never knew that person. I never did this. I never did that. It's like, well, then how does anything make any sense if you don't have continuity? Then we have the almighty reboots and relaunches that seem to come with more frequency now. In 1985, DC wanted to simplify things and gave us Crisis on Infinite Earths, written by Marv Wolfman and illustrated by George Perez. The series removed the multiverse concept from the fictional DC universe, depicting the death of long-standing characters Supergirl and the Barry Allen incarnation of the Flash. Continuity in the DC universe was divided into pre-crisis and post-crisis periods. For a while, it fixed things, mostly, but soon enough, continuity started to get confusing again. It seemed DC kept having to tweak things and launched Zero Hour Crisis in Time in 1994, Infinite Crisis in 2005, Final Crisis in 2008, and Convergence in 2015. The New 52 in 2011 was a revamp and relaunch that gave us mixed results, and that was followed by, well, you get the picture. Every solution brought new problems. Marvel has had their own tweaks to deal with as well. By 2010, they started to rebrand their line with the Heroic Age and Marvel Now initiatives. 5 years later, they really turned it up with their all-new, all-different shakeup. This was soon followed by Marvel Now 2.0 and Legacy. It's a lot. I still forget how some timelines have settled, so I can't even imagine being a new reader. Well, you certainly, you have to disregard so much of what they do. And, you put all this time and all this money into making these comics. You shouldn't be putting readers in a position where they're disregarding massive amounts of what you're doing. If comic books didn't have it tough enough, it faces a new enemy to its continuity with the arrival of the cinematic universes. Less of a big deal, right? I mean, you don't expect the comics to hook up with and sync up with the movies. That it's a separate genre. You spend a separate amount of time watching movies or TV shows than you spend going through the comics. You have different expectations. I don't think people really ever expect continuity between movies and comics or TV shows and comics, but definitely let me know what you think. Marvel and DC have put a lot of time and money into their big screen offerings, and we're getting a trickle-down effect from it. And add in television universes, and it's enough to throw your hands in the air. For a new fan, comic books can be intimidating. Hell, longtime fans are often left wondering what's going on. Keith Giffen once said, "Continuity, how important is it?" Not at all. Continuity hamstrings story and keeps comics inaccessible to casual readers. Is he right? I like Keith Giffen, but I don't agree with that statement. For me, as I've gotten older, continuity has become less and less important. The characters I've grown up on carry the same origin, but I'm more for a good story with great art. If things don't line up exactly, I'll deal. Keeping track of the various Spider-Men, which Superman did what, and the Legion of Superheroes' exact date of formation has become less important. What do you think? Well, continuity is not important because they're not keeping track of continuity. How can you make it something that's important if they're not keeping track of it? Adding continuity to comic books is like adding color to comic books. It's like adding an extra 16 pages to comic books. It's like putting a great writer on a comic instead of a mediocre writer on a comic, or a great artist on a comic instead of a great artist, a mediocre artist on a comic. You know, great design in terms of the logo instead of something really mediocre or something that's just not even thought through. Continuity is a tremendous amount of work to do as an editor-in-chief, organizing all that. We published a line of comics called Triumphant Comics, which is a line of science fiction color comics. The best one known was Chromium Man by Adam Polina for us. And keeping track of what happened when and all that, it adds tremendous value to the stories. Like, it's very cool to know that things actually matter when they happen in a line of comics. But it's incredibly difficult to keep track of. What it does, though, is it is discipline. It limits the number of books you can do. I remember Jim Shooter told me about Valiant 1.0. He only ever intended to publish 18 ongoing series, maximum. And I was floored because I was a publisher at the time and they were doing incredible business. And I was like, why would you limit this to 18 series if you can make so much money publishing this? And he said 2 reasons. One, I want people to buy everything that we're doing. So I only publish enough comics every week. That would be 4 or 5 comics per week that people could realistically afford to buy all of. At the time, that would have been $8 or $10 a week out of somebody's pocket. He said, 2, it's the only number I can keep track of in terms of continuity. So I wouldn't know what's going on if there were more than 18 titles. It's just too much to track. And I still looked at that and I was like, all right, yeah, but why would you do that? But then I kind of understand, like, well, because if you take continuity away from the story, you just take it out and be like, all right, well, continuity is not going to be there. You do lose a huge aspect to the quality of the storytelling. Now, that's and the quality of the comic. Because nothing makes sense. They're just stories about characters. That's fine to just do stories about characters. But maybe that would be a good use of periodical comics, is like, you know, limit the number of comics, produce enough of them that you could put somebody brilliant in charge to keep track of the continuity and spend all the time on that. Agree to how much roughly time should pass between issues. And even if it's limited to, like, okay, then fine. Marvel only does 16, 12, or 18 new periodical comics per month, but they're all excellent, and they all take advantage of continuity. And to do more issues, just do standalone graphic novels. And be like, well, here's a story about when Hulk was really Batman. Or here's a story about when the Thing became a woman and join the army, whatever it might be. You know, here's 18 different Spider-Mans or 6 different Spider-Mans, but make them in a standalone graphic novel. Why would they have to be in periodical format? Because the nature of periodicals is not just that it's absolute, pure, nonsensical fiction. Periodicals has been done to produce, you know, regular, serialized, ongoing content, whether it's news, but you don't really regard periodicals as something that's just endless fantasy. It's been done. You can do it, but periodicals are supposed to have information in them. That's why they're releasing them on a regular basis, right? The daily newspaper, the weekly magazine, whatever the heck it's going to be. So, you know, why disconnect the content so much from reality when you have the ability and the luxury of producing graphic novels, right? You can do as many graphic novels as you want. Who's going to complain? And then you'd actually have a core line of significant and meaningful ongoing series that, sure, you want to reboot them every 10 years, whatever. You can make a 10-year plan and restart them every 10 years if that's what you need to do. Then you'd have a real event, right? Because you have a once-in-a-decade event to reboot everything, and then everything for 10 straight years would actually make sense in terms of continuity. And you'd have a discipline to not go and have, like, all right, we have one really successful character, so we'll exploit it to a point of oblivion and have 5, 10, whatever ongoing Spider-Man series or Black Panther series, whatever it is that's working that they're going to then multiply to get a little extra periodical sales. Again, why not just spin those off as extra graphic novels? You could do them well enough and have them be their own continuity inherent, like just to one single graphic novel story, like a movie. Just have it make sense within that one take of it, that one chunk of it, and then promote that as an event. Why not? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. It's a big help to me. I appreciate you doing that. And also check out collegeofthedead.com. We do have continuity with this series. We've got the first 2 done. They ship immediately. The 3rd one we have written. We're working on the art for it. And sign up at epicmermaids.com. Also big into continuity. You see, I like continuity. It's like Game of Thrones with mermaids. I think you really like it. Definitely check it out. I will see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.